I love hearing Laura talk, especially when it's about me. Just a little business. I just wanted to let you know that, or say congratulations, because according to Joanne's treasury report, you have more in your bank account than I do. You also may need to redo some of your votes tonight, because I think my entire family voted. I'm not sure if that was allowed. Of any organization that I would have wanted to be honored by in Santa Barbara, particularly at this moment, it's STEM women. I have long admired the independent thinkers who engage with this organization, the courageous positions that you take, how thorough your actions as a group, how through your actions as a group, you have over and over exemplified the best of democratic values. Something I think we can all agree we've probably taken for granted for too long. So to be singled out by you as Women of the Year is an honor I do not take lightly, particularly since the two things I chose to do since coming to Santa Barbara don't usually win any popularity contests, which is being a school board member and the owner of a local newspaper. I look around and I am very aware that there are many women on this lawn who could be the woman of any year. Brave, interesting, brilliant, audacious, baller women. I know a lot of people these days like to use the word badass, but I'm particularly sensitive about that part of my body, so I'm going to stick with baller. People often ask, who are your mentors? It's a difficult question for me to answer because I've been lucky to have many. For me, mentorship has always come in moments, in the words and actions of my friends or people I've met along the way. Sometimes it's as simple as something someone has said that has resonated and changed me in some way. The fact is, this event is filled with my mentors, including my very first one. My mother, Gwyn Lurie, who at the age of 5 had to hide in an attic for 2 years in Poland from the Nazis. During that time, she lost her mother and her brother and her childhood. But she survived. And she went on courageously and lovingly to raise 3 children, my amazing brother David, who unfortunately is not here today, my remarkable force of nature sister, Leslie Gilbert Lurie, who, by the way, is also recently appointed by Gavin Newsom on the California, I know what it is. She's always told me what to do. The Cal State Board of Trustees. And of course, me, her favorite. Mom, could you stand? See, recognize. Sorry, this is about to get up. Each of us in our own ways have always tried to leave the rooms we've entered better than how we found them. And that's in large part because of my mom. I also want to give some props to my dad, who is no longer here in bodily form, but was the kindest and most decent man I've ever known. who taught me that it's character that warrants respect, not a position or a title. He wasn't some big captain of industry or anything that would land someone in the history books, but rather how he treated people, how everyone who knew him felt seen and valued, and that was his superpower. So much so that when he died, people came from far and wide to his standing room only memorial to honor the profound impact that he had on their lives. And I know he's proudly looking down from wherever he is with that Frank Lurie twinkle in his eye. I also want to acknowledge my incredible daughter, Noah, beautiful and full of grace inside and out, who is full of plans and passion and is also one of my greatest mentors. And my other amazing daughter, Sydney, who's away at school and isn't able to be here today. And finally, my biggest supporter in all things, who happens to be my husband. I often wonder if his ability to be such a compassionate friend and patient teacher is in part due to his mother having had the foresight to give him the non-gendered name Leslie. I thought a lot about what I wanted to say today that would be worthy of your time. And because this is the Democratic Women of Santa Barbara, I decided I wanted to talk about leadership and women doing it differently. So let me begin by saying that over the years, it has become very clear to me that leadership is not an office. It is not a fancy title, and it should never be confused with power. Leadership is an orientation. It's a way of being in the world. It's a willingness to stand up and to take responsibility in this life. I don't need to stand here and tell you what a difficult moment this is in our world and how much is at stake at this moment. We each, in our own way, are involved in trying to push things in a better direction. And it's hard and it's overwhelming because the forces we're up against are very tricky and often elusive. The playing field is not only unlevel, but it's littered with landmines. When Claudette Roehrig reached out to me September 21st to ask me if I'd agree to be honored by Dem Women Santa Barbara, I was not expecting it. Well, I was kind of expecting it because Meryl Zigar tipped me off. But let's say for the sake of a good story, I didn't know. And when I was told that I was expected to give a speech, I immediately knew what I wanted to talk about. The project that I've been working on for the past 18 months, that at its core aspires to exemplify the highest democratic ideals. It's called the Giving List Women, and its mission is to help the world understand that girls and women are not only worth supporting, they are the single most powerful lever for bringing about change. It is the key to unlocking a better future. And yet, less than 2% of all philanthropic dollars currently go towards organizations focused on women and girls. Next spring, we are bringing together here in Santa Barbara 150 philanthropic and impact partners from around the world to strengthen this narrative that helps the world to understand that it is imperative that women and girls become a lens and not simply a lane of philanthropy. So that's what I intended to talk about today. how things would look very different if there were more women in power. I'd have put every penny I had and those that I've yet to make on that. And then October 7th happened. And then October 8th. And my certainty that women would do it better was tested. And then in some very important ways, we didn't do it better. And that broke my heart. Come October 8th, women had a very important time at bat. And in my opinion, we kind of struck out, and struck out spectacularly. In the wake of Hamas's terrorist attack against Israel, where women were raped, babies and grandparents were slaughtered or kidnapped, or unspeakably worse, we didn't hear a peep from any of the women's organizations, not in Santa Barbara, not from the thousands of feminist organizations, women's studies departments, or feminist leaders, not locally, not nationally, not globally. And I was vexed, and I was deeply and profoundly sad. Where were the women who taught us that silence is complicity? That the millions who donned their pussy hats after Trump was elected and marched for women's rights, terrified that Trump would turn America into the Handmaid's Tale, who called for an end to violence against women and an end to women as the spoils of war. Believe all women, they said, in the editorial pages of newspapers across the country, writing in favor of #MeToo. I thought #MeToo was such a landmark moment. Almost every woman I know did. Women were finally standing up and saying, enough. We will no longer be silent. We will no longer just take it. We will no longer continue to play by the rules set up by male-dominant institutions that neither represent our voices nor protect our interests. Statutes of limitations on rape cases were extended. The legitimacy of gag orders against women were questioned and in some cases ruled out. Women were coming out from the dark corners of this world and risking everything to bravely speak up. And for once, our voices were being heard. Yet there we were on October 7th. Once again, rape is used as a weapon of war. Young women bleeding from their crotches paraded through the streets of Gaza. Yet I was not seeing a single statement from a feminist organization in this country. Not one gender studies department has defended even one victimized woman, and the silence is deafening. It took the UN 50 days to say it. As a woman and as a feminist, this offends me. As a mother of 2 daughters, it terrifies me. I trust we can all agree, I know we can all agree, that rape is never okay. That kidnapping a 9-month-old child is never okay, and the loss of innocent life in a war is utterly tragic. And that silence is complicity. Some, I think, were afraid to speak up, maybe for fear that it would seem like they were saying that the Palestinian people and their plight didn't matter, which of course it does. But for some reason in that moment, it became too difficult for so many to hold more than one thought at one time. I am not afraid to speak up. I am speaking up because I am afraid. I still believe with all my heart and brain that having more women in positions of power will profoundly improve our world, that it's our greatest hope, but only if we're willing to do things differently and courageously. The fact is, it doesn't really matter how many girls and women we prepare to lead families, businesses, universities, countries. If we're not going to make the conscious decision to lead differently, then it's just performative. It's just set decorating. It's just fashion. It's pussy hats, which I happen to like, by the way. Because clearly, as women, we are susceptible and capable of engaging in the same tribalism as men, unless we choose not to. Because we understand that this moment calls not just for women to lead, but to lead differently. So what does that look like? The eminent psychologist Abraham Maslow famously said, "To the man who only has a hammer, everything he encounters looks like a nail." Which is another way of saying if a man or woman only has one tool for solving problems, he or she will attempt to use that tool to solve every problem, even if that tool is pretty much guaranteed not to work. I think we need more tools in our toolbox. But first, we need to identify the problem. As I see it, the enemy of progress and peace is what I call the algorithm. The algorithm is the echo chamber that exists on the internet, where we all get the majority of our information. What's worse, the algorithm has jumped the rails from the internet to our actual corporeal lives and spread to other forms of what we used to call discourse. Today, most discourse is much more dis than course. As I see it, the algorithm is another form of authoritarianism, silencing oppositional voices through careful, curated omission. The result is our computers have become a 24-hour regurgitation of what the algorithm already knows we like to hear, a cyber hallelujah chorus, if you will. It's gotten so bad that just 45 miles from here in Westlake, people were shouting at each other and so determined not to hear one another, to the point where a man smashed another man over the head with his megaphone, not only killing him, but providing the most poignant metaphor for the world we find ourselves living in. People do not want to even hear what the other has to say. It has gotten so extreme that the 3 university presidents interrogated this week by Congress appeared to me downright Trumpian. Obstinate, that's okay. Obstinate, arrogant, and recalcitrant at the very inquiry directed at them. How were they any better than Donald Trump at any one of his depositions? But there is hope. I have seen the solution, and I have been so fortunate to participate in it in some small ways. I have witnessed far better tools than Maslow's hammer used even here in sleepy Santa Barbara and implemented with great success. One of my first jobs when I came to Santa Barbara was as an elected member of the Montecito Union School Board at a time when our district was a mess. A popular principal had been fired, parents were petitioning to recall trustees. The board was self-admittedly dysfunctional and therefore ineffective. And who was suffering? The very kids we were there to protect. I quickly learned that everyone wants what's right for their kids. The problem is we don't always agree on what that is. So what mattered was how we showed up in order to work together to find meaningful solutions to difficult problems. As a newly elected school board, we decided to establish norms and values for our board, agreed upon rules of engagement so that we could do our job. And we agreed to some very simple ground rules: assuming best intentions, engaging in active listening, sharing our disappointment directly to and not behind the backs of our adversaries, or worse, online. All pretty basic, common sense stuff, but it worked. We went on, I believe, to do excellent work on behalf of the children. We even hired the district's extraordinary superintendent, Anthony Rainey, who's here today, who is another one of my mentors, who taught me that there is no one who is unworthy of being listened to, even the people I can't stand. Another example I'd like to share with you takes place in my day job. My work partner, Tim Buckley, and I disagree on most things political. I look at the sky and I see blue. He sees a completely different color. But I can tell you in no uncertain terms that working by his side makes me better. Hearing his views makes me better. He reads everything I write, and he will often say, if you just take out this one trigger line, people may not agree with you, but they will at least be able to hear what you have to say. And that's meaningful to me, because if I'm just talking to myself, what's the point? We've taken this embracing of the other even further with our Dinner with Friends group, which I wrote about recently in the Montecito Journal. Dinner with Friends is an ongoing series of dinners my husband and I have on a fairly regular basis with people from different backgrounds, with different biases, different histories, different faiths, strategies, and yes, skin color. And regardless of our different tribes, we have created respectful rules of engagement for having meals and political discourse in each other's homes, to the point where after October 7th, the first people to check in on me and my family were a group of African Americans, Black friends of ours, some of them Muslim, although our relationship started from a place of some mutual disappointment and distrust. Today, I count the people in this group among my good friends in Santa Barbara. The three examples I just gave are all different forms of the same thing. Engaging with the other, people with whom we have a beef, but we treat each other with respect, creating rules of discourse. And the most important thing in terms of our world of trigger words and oversensitivity, rather than avoiding that which makes us uncomfortable, leaning into it, sitting with the very people and ideas that may be foreign to us. Because to do otherwise, I believe we are robbing ourselves of the chance to grow. We're all just living in the algorithm writ large. And what is the algorithm but a sophisticated version of Maslow's hammer? It's very good for those $5 trillion internet companies, but I don't need to tell you how it's been going for us, the human end users. Women are not monolithic. Like any group, we have strong opinions among us, and we will never, all of us, agree on everything, and maybe even anything. Not tax policies, not even women's reproductive rights, not where free speech ends and hate speech begins, and not how to achieve peace in the Middle East. But we can agree on the rules by which we are going to have these vital conversations. We can agree on the importance of respecting the different paths each of us has traveled. We can agree to encourage difficult dialogue. We can agree to not cancel each other. We can agree to commit to the absolute rejection of violence against all women in all of its forms, and men, by the way. We can agree to lead with compassion. In the 20 years I spent working as a screenwriter, there was almost never a time that I didn't get to the middle of the second act of a script, usually around page 70, most screenplays are about 120 pages, that I didn't get lost. When I had to look back and remind myself why I was writing this story, what this story was about. And then I would get to the end of Act 2, around page 90, to the place in the story when all is lost. It's the moment in a movie when our hero decides that in order to win, she must stand up and risk losing everything. My friends, we are now on page 90. Welcome to the end of the second act of our story. The moment when we most need our heroes to stand up and do the right thing, to risk losing in order to win. Because the stakes could not be higher. And because if that doesn't happen, I'm quite convinced that none of us are going to feel very satisfied with how this story ends. As a woman, we can change this world. As women, we can change this world. I believe that with every fiber of my being. And we can be models, not just for our children, but for all the wonderful men in our lives. But it will involve courage and leadership and a willingness to do things different so that in the end, all will not be lost. I believe we have the chance to get this right. We can elect great women to every level of office. We can have women in every boardroom and every C-suite. We are uniquely poised to step up and to make our values visible simply by how we lead. We can, each of us, become the heroes of our own story. And I say, let's do this. Let's do this differently. It's time for us to dust off our pussy hats. Thank you for this honor, and thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you. Thank you so much.